Alex and Prohaska's losses will affect this fight.
He said that his
Alex and Prohaska's losses will it affect this fight?
Will my loss to Alex and Yuri affect this fight? How would it do that?
Siz belki Azərbaycanca deyərsiniz ki,
Yəni Alex və Prohaskas məğlubiyyəti, yəni növbəti döyüşə necə təsir eləyəcək?
Alexin bir də təkrar, Alexin Prohaska məğlubiyyəti.
Yox, Hill'in Alex və Prohaskas məğlubiyyəti, yəni necə təsir eləyəcək bu döyüşə? Son döyüşünə. Yəni son iki döyüşündə məğlub olub, yəni onu demək istəyirəm.
You lost in last two fights. How it's affect to you in coming fight?
Yəni bu döyüşə necə...
Okay, yeah. I think we can comfortably come to the conclusion that Jamahal Hill does not have the sauce, and maybe he never did. He is a tremendously sauceless individual. I know he's a former champ, and I know he looked like a shonen character in that fight against Glover where he won the belt, but everything we've seen from the guy since has just been straight dog water. Just packaged, patented, sealed and approved, doo-doo feces. Khalil Roundtree just put on one of the most effortlessly effective performances I've seen in a high-level matchup in recent memory. He bagged all 5 rounds and just schooled Hill to a UD. The octagon wasn't set ablaze in the process or anything, and it was actually kind of a tepid fight with a few explosive moments sprinkled throughout. But he pretty much just danced around a stumbling Jamal for the entire 25 minutes. He very quickly put his opponent in an awkward position by smashing his right calf to smithereens, forcing Jamal to switch to orthodox from then on out, and it's no secret, that's not exactly his bread and butter. So once he pulverized his legs well enough and he got Hill's hands nice and low, he started leaping into overhands and hooks intermittently, dropping the former champ on numerous occasions. Now Hill was able to recover from them pretty quickly, and save for that leg kick damage, he never looked too wobbly or anything. But each and every one of them just put a stamp on each round they were in for Roundtree. It's not like he needed it, he really didn't. But if there was any doubt, now there wasn't. It wasn't exactly as exciting as we were hoping it would be, so I can understand by some being put off, by there basically being half the output we expected. But personally, I was just taken aback by how effortless this was. Like, Khalil barely broke a sweat. When they first booked this fight last year, Hill was fresh off getting annihilated by Pereira, and Roundtree was fresh off turning Anthony Smith into red paste on the floor in the Apex. On Hill's end, it was really no harm, no foul. No big deal getting knocked unconscious by the scariest left hook in the octagon. And plus, his performance right before that was him putting Glover Teixeira through a cheese grater, so I didn't personally think this is just indicative of what we were going to see going forward. And on Roundtree's end, Anthony Smith isn't exactly the most amazing win on the planet. Not a bad win, a respectable one even, but nothing that would really lead you to believe he has what it takes to start taking skulls in the top 10. When these two guys were pitted against each other, I was super excited because I saw it being a close back and forth scrap where someone's getting chinned at some point. Basically guaranteed violence. But then skip ahead a year later to when the fight actually happened, with the two men coming off of TKO losses at the hands of Prohaska and Pereira respectively. I think most were still expecting this to be a pretty even split affair. One guy would bag this round, one guy the other. They'd go tit for tat until someone gets chinned. Well, now that we're on the tail end of the fight taking place, we can safely say that Hill didn't belong anywhere near a cage opposite Roundtree. What in the yeast-infected fuck? That was so uncompetitive, it was actually shocking. I'm not trying to be an asshole here. I mean, I'm not the biggest Jamahal Hill fan. I'm not really sure anyone is. I thought at the very least he'd be able to make things competitive. At the least he'd be able to take a couple rounds. But no, he just got taken to the cleaners round after round. It's not like it was a complete ass whooping or anything. He didn't get his Jamahal hole resized past the point of no return. But I mean it when I say he had absolutely zero answer for anything Roundtree was throwing at him. Just nothing. Zilch. He showed heart and grit for staying in at the full 25 while getting his legs chewed off the bone and being sent crashing to the canvas several times, don't get me wrong. And he was still able to find some nice counter shots on occasion, but it was just not enough to gain him any momentum as the minutes pressed on. I honestly think this loss is worse than the previous two. You get knocked out by Pereira? Sure man, who doesn't? No problem, homosexual. We'll get him next time. You trade bombs with Yuri and end up getting clipped after a relatively competitive match? Okay, no worries. Yuri is a psycho, so no harm. But you go in there and airball for half an hour against a guy who's only using about 50% of his horsepower? That is a big, fat, steaming yikes for me, y'all. And seriously though, Khalil looked like he was kinda not trying that hard. He knew he probably shouldn't end up in another barn burner where he could get starched by Hill if he indulged in the pocket too much, so he played things very safe. Not to the point of running away and making things stinky and smelly and rancid, but enough to bag each round intelligently, then exploding into some nuclear bombs after enough snake charming had taken place. He was so relaxed and confident in the fact that he was winning each round that for pretty much every single one of them, he would just sidestep around the cage for the final 10 seconds. Because he knew Jamahal Hill's peg leg ass could not cut off the cage like he needed to. Normally we condemn actively running away from your opponent, but I don't know. Something about him just winning each round so easily that he could just coast until the clock ran out just oozed confidence. Again, I will reiterate, this man barely broke a sweat. And it really does make you wonder if Jamahal Hill was ever that good to begin with. I'm not going to be a big puckering asshole and try and say he sucks and he sucked the whole time. He's just been secretly shit. But I will say I feel like we found his ceiling. He rocketed through the rankings at 205 pretty rapidly after joining in 2020, and after a few setbacks like him getting his arm ripped off by Paul Craig, he was able to put together a respectable enough win streak with names like Jimmy Crute, Johnny Walker, and Thiago Santos, before getting that last minute call to take on Old Man Glover for that vacant belt. He was definitely good enough to make it to the dance, don't get me wrong. But his wins prior to taking on Teixeira were kind of middling if we're being honest. Jimmy Crute is a bread sandwich fighter, Johnny Walker has a chin made of loose cabbage leaves held together with eyelash glue, and Thiago Santos was getting pretty old by the time they fought. And while Glover Teixeira was a legend, and still elite even in his 40s, he was also old, and his prior war with Prohaska clearly did a number on him. Jamahal looked incredible in that fight, to be sure, but the caveats are there. When we see him in there against the Pereiras and the Eries and the Roundtrees, he starts getting smoked. How much of that can be attributed to his injury that had him on the sidelines following that Teixeira fight? Who knows? But Yuri had a similarly, or actually probably way worse injury, and he's back in top form these days. Anyways, I'm a rambling rambler, but my point is, I think Hill might be our friendly, or perhaps not so friendly, neighborhood number 10 ranked light heavyweight in the near future. I think we can see at this point he's not quite good enough to hack it with the top 5 guys, with the young bucks down there, but we'll see him as a proverbial club bouncer to the top 10. As prospects start bearing down the rankings, they gotta get through this guy first. And I can see him racking up some wins in that regard, maybe trying his hand at Ascension once again, but I kind of feel like all these guys in the top 10 are just gonna hand him his ass going forward.